there folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel, a place where I discuss different topics including spirituality, deep introspection, psychology, game interpretation and many other more, answering different questions and well, on and on. Now the purpose of this video is to share some wisdom on the difference in between science and spirituality. Can these actually correlate together? And well, let's actually see. The information and wisdom that I'm gonna provide belong to my own experiences, so I again would rather underline the fact that people do not follow whatever I say and take it for granted. Always take whatever I say or any other source says, okay, always take these with a grain of salt. Now the point about this is there have been debates throughout the world which would be better, science or spirituality. Now which one would be more useful, which one would be more, okay. Now the first thing to understand in this question is the question places an accent not on science and spirituality. That's something most people won't understand. The deeper psychology, okay, the psychological part of that is the ego, okay, because the question says which one is more important, okay. So there is more and you have importance, okay. The core is more and the, let's say, the smaller core is importance, okay. To the ego, the important, okay, word is the most important, because the ego can rule you through importance and through the stories that you are creating. So the question about this is how much how much will people agree to keep following their egos, okay, their urges? Because the point is science and spirituality can work together, but in general they are where one would end, okay, the other one would start. Of course, this is a personal standpoint, so feel free to listen till the end and then provide me some of your answers as well. So science is the way we are using it. Science, as of what I see it as and as of what I've been perceiving it, science has always been about survival, okay. Now science in the older times, maybe it wasn't about technology, building robots, aircrafts and such, although there are different sources that indirectly present the Egyptians and other ancient civilizations as having had technology, having reached far more advanced levels and such. But let's stick specifically to what most people will accept, because people can only accept what they want and what they vibrate as, okay, what their vibration is. So the point is, when people make such acceptance, okay, that is meaning. People can only accept things based on their own memory, because whatever they have acquired as experiences is their memory base. They cannot simply accept something that does not belong to them. And all this acceptance is nothing else than survival. First of all, it is the survival of their personality. In order to receive understanding over something, you have to identify yourself with that. In order to identify yourself with something, you need a personality. So the personality is theoretically something fake. It is as far away from your genuineness as possible. But at the same time, the personality is also needed, because you kind of need a persona in this world to exist. Now, how much importance you give it, that is the problem, because the more importance you give it, the more meaning you place on it. As I've been saying in previous videos, when you give meaning to something, that something is becoming like a kind of a god or goddess in your mind, and all the stories that you're building, right, to support that idea are like priests, okay, like preachers that will remain in the back of your mind and will keep preaching those ideas, right? And as long as you give importance to that deity you've just created, those preachers will keep preaching in the back of your mind. So you're technically creating little cults in your mind every time you're doing all these importance giving. Now science has always been an idea of survival, okay, and I'm not saying about survival in the sense of beating starvation, although to a certain extent it's also been something like that, okay. But the point about this is very simple. As people made more and more discoveries, okay, they were also meant to be, survival related. When people invented, actually, they didn't invent, it's kind of debatable if they invented or they discovered something. When people created, let's say, their weapons, finally they felt theoretically more secure, but still being stuck at the level of, survival. Their point was, how can we actually improve these things, right? So nothing that exists in this world is evil, okay? When money was created, it was created because of a need. And again, a need inquires survival, right? A need represents survival, okay? So the point about this is, when money was created, there was little to no evil thought about that, okay? Just because money allowed us to, discover and go deeper within certain urges of the mind, okay? Certain prioritizations that the mind would build to support its survival, okay? Hence the, rooting of what people may call evil emotions or states of existence, like, hatred, rejection, repulsion, okay? Money is not evil, okay? So were the metals that people found, right? Those metals have been used to build, I don't know, build certain structures that would allow, bigger structures to be scaffolded on, right? And people have also built weapons, okay? Now, the way a certain thing is used, it's up to each and every mind that will employ that, right? So in time, stone was, for example, discovered, and since humanity was still young and was vibrating at the lower level of survival, right, stone has always been used to survive, right, to improve our survival rates. We have learned in time how to build houses, later on how to build walls, right? And because survival is not only about being defensive but also about being aggressive, the point about you are suddenly losing things and your survival being at stake, people required things to break down those walls, right? So staircases were invented so that soldiers could go up. Then there were those super mobile, well, more or less, stone towers, right? Initially they were made of wood, but later on they started building them from stone because wood can easily be ignited, right? So all these are little scientific endeavors, right? These are little scientific developments that humanity has done, right? All these have been constant improvements, but again, they only followed survival. Because the reason why all this scientific development targeted or was actually triggered by survival was because humanity for so long has been stuck in the idea that this body is what they are and that's it. There is nothing else beyond that. So the survival of that body was what represented humans, right? So at that level, humans and animals were kind of the same thing, because the animal, well, compared to humans, the animal is the best at survival, but in its own environment. Sure, if you take an animal from their own environment and you put it somewhere else, they still are, acutely connected to their senses, right? To their instincts. So they will always be much better than humans when it comes to survival. But our greatest advantage was our ability to thrive in almost any, if not in any, environment. Sure, in other environments it would be much difficult. It's like if you're coming from an equatorial area in the northern or southern part, okay, it's much colder, but you can still survive given the fact that, well, all the equipment will be provided, right? Like very thick clothes and the such. Getting adapted will be somewhat problematic, but come again, it's not impossible to survive. Animals are simply capable of surviving, and all they do is survival, okay? But we as humans kind of lived like animals for a very long time. We identified ourselves with the body just like the animals do, and any injury that could be produced to our body, we always ran away from that because, pain is what we have always been running away from. Now, as technology in the writer sense, like the way people would know it today. The explosion of technology began with the industrial age, right? The British began the industrial age, and that was the period when machines started working, started uh, working for us in their very primitive ways, okay? And then we started um, you know defiling the body of our mother planet by simply removing precious materials from it. And those precious materials were very important where they were, because they acted as defenders, like a kind of a barrier in between the dimensions that lie lower, uh, below the surface, and what is here on the surface, okay? So the point about that is, well, let's not blame ourselves. Progress will always be sought after, because progress is again another type of survival, okay? It is another type of the ego mechanism that has been guiding humanity towards such greater depths of evolution, right? In the Eastern societies, where they played so much accent on stillness, right, on wisdom and understanding the inside, right, they didn't have these urges, because many people were capable of going beyond the physical and understanding that beyond the physical there is so much more. And once someone realizes that there is something beyond the physical, right, their need for survival will simply dwindle, okay? It's not gonna ever disappear, okay? The body, as long as it is alive, it will have a survival mechanism. But the more people increase their vibration and go beyond the mind, the more they are capable of harnessing greater powers. And one of those is how you can simply control your survival impulses, right, your urges. Now, in the Western societies, everything was regarding survival, okay? There was this highly important survival aspect. For 1000 years, or more actually than 1000 years, Christianity has held, humanity like at a standstill, okay? It was important to a certain extent, right? And the impact of this, spiritually speaking, was great, because when this period, right, when this great period of suppression ended, okay, the impulse of survival still existed. People always wanted a greater and better way of life, right, than the medieval times would always know. So that is why all this explosion of material development, right, expanding on all possible fields. And that's how in the Western world people created huge machines to do the work for them, like excavating mines much faster than people could dig them, and creating railways and creating engines that could simply pull a lot of weight. So all that excavated material could easily be taken away in other needed parts if needed. But the point was, humanity managed a lot of breakthroughs. Huge ships were built that allowed the transportation of materials uh, even over the oceans, okay? Now, ships have always existed, like ships have existed for a very long time, but finally humanity has made a huge technological outbreak, managing to build steel that can also float and is also somewhat alive, okay? It's no longer a boat of wood that humans would have to row for. And if people would get sick and the population of that ship would be reduced, then the maneuverability and the speed of that vessel would also be impaired. Now you suddenly have something that works by its own self. All you have to do is feed that, and it just works. And that's how steamships appeared. And then later on, all this was just because the human ego craved more and more freedom, and it was never enough. Humans always created things starting from the industrial age, but look at things even nowadays. We have developed in the last 200 years or 300 years, from a point of technology and material development, we have developed far faster than any other society in the previous 50,000 years, let's say. And we still feel like we don't have anything. The reason is because the way we are using science is only for survival. We are getting stuck in meaning that we attribute things, and that is why the more meaning we give to those things, we are straying away from our greater awareness and from our authenticity. So therefore we will always take things for granted. We won't ever be thankful to those people who worked probably an entire life to come up with whatever little or great inventions that we have nowadays. Back in the times, the only way you could communicate with someone was, yelling from your window to the other person's window, or, speaking to them, side by side, one in front of the other. Nowadays, we have technology that can connect us literally anywhere or almost anywhere on the planet, and even outside the planet, in the stations, the space stations. So the point about this is, it's kind of funny to a certain extent, because we have so much technology but we still feel that we don't have anything, because it is still our egotistical urge, and the egotistical urges are nothing else than survival mechanisms. We are still stuck in those 1000 years of Christianity suppression, and this is still going on. Even if Christianity is no longer as suppressing, all that memory of our ancestors being suppressed has been passed down to the greater generations. And it doesn't matter if someone is suppressing you or not. It's still that memory that you're carrying, and that is gonna make it in your mind that you're still being suppressed and you still need even a greater level of existence. In 100 years, maybe, we will become probably some fat creatures with barely any bones, that our locomotion will be just moving around like, well, in circles but just rolling around like a sphere, because we will have technology and robots do literally everything that we would ever need. But still our lives would be shit, because deep down inside there is still that urge to survive. There is still that urge to exist, right? So all this being said, hopefully you liked my approaches, okay? So science is not something bad, it's not something limited, it's not something evil, okay? But the way we are using it, it's, from a survival standpoint. Now science is always gonna be something, limiting in a way, because not necessarily limiting, but science will always regard the mind, okay? Now the mind is up till the third chakra, right? The first three chakras belonging to the physical body. Now our mind, okay, as it exists and as it develops, cannot simply comprehend things that go beyond the fourth dimension, which is that of the heart. Now when people become more and more acquainted and knowledgeable of their insides, okay, they start going on that spiritual journey. Now the point about that is, well, it's not something bad necessarily, but spiritual journey is kind of contrasting, because a journey requires movement, but spirituality doesn't imply movement, because beyond the physical there is no more movement. There is no such thing as moving from A to B, because there is no distance in there. If you don't have any space, there is no distance, so you're not gonna travel anywhere. The only thing that expands and may give you the idea of movement, the only thing that expands is your mind. You have, well, actually not your mind, your awareness. You're becoming more aware of certain things, so as you expand as a certain being, you're gonna start seeing things from a distance away. And as you see things from a distance away, as you see those things, okay, you don't need to be brainy, okay? You don't need to know things mentally. If you watch them through a state of meditativeness, you will understand their purpose, because science will always remain something active. You have to learn it, you have to study, you have to question, you have to find certain things, you have to prove certain things. Spirituality is all about expanding yourself beyond the capabilities of the mind, because that's kind of the point. You cannot do science spiritually, and you cannot do spirituality scientifically. You can actually do that, but up to a certain extent, because science belongs to the mind, and the mind is desperate about meaning, and you can't give meaning to literally everything. That is why people can and will never ever be able of defining consciousness in its full sense, although people believe consciousness is something, but that's just a tiny bit of, the broader aspect of what consciousness in its entirety is. And certain things beyond the mind, like for example life and what life is, these also cannot be defined other than till the highest limitations of the mind, because the mind is always gonna want to place meaning on things, and the moment you start placing meaning on things, you are minimizing them from their potential. So I'm not saying science is inferior to spirituality in a way, but science is a different approach of life. Okay, it is a different approach towards life, and science is also the material necessity. Now, of course, people can all go fully spiritual, and they can discover certain things, and using your third eye, you can find out how you can build a certain idea, how you can do a certain thing, but that requires a very high level of self-awareness as a race. Up till then, science will always be needed, because there will be, like always, there will be 99%, and this is slowly gonna decrease, this percentage of people who are simply mind focused, right? Their spirituality ain't that important, because we are still giving too much importance to the mind and to our survival as a race. So spirituality is all about understanding certain things, okay? Inner standing, better said, because once you are capable of detaching from your mind, and you suddenly get a glimpse of how your solar system or this galaxy revolves around other aspects, okay, greater aspects that the mind can easily or with difficulty comprehend. The point is, if you keep watching those without giving any meaning, you will simply understand, or better said, understand what the logic, well, logic still belongs to the mind, but why things happen the way they happen. That is why people who have become so deeply introspective can always explain things that science is still struggling with. Now, I'm not saying that spirituality is better than science, because spirituality also requires its own, depths of awareness and depths of, understanding and understanding things, just like science does. Science requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of seeking, and demonstrating things, doing calculations and the such. You have to be very literate to do science, else you won't be met with great results. Spirituality doesn't necessarily require you to be literate, but the problem is, if you are not literate, you may not be able to explain the things that you see. Now, science is also something exterior based. It's always based on your senses, so as long as it's based on your senses, it's based on your memory, it's based on your mind, it's based on your body. And all the five senses that we have and the body that we have, to the most, they will concern our survival, because you have to ensure the survival of this body, okay, in order to experience through it. So technically, you are from the beginning limited by at least a tiny speck, at least a tiny amount of survival, okay, that will always exist in there. But the point of science is, again, it will be limited to your five perceptions. Now, sure, we can create several apparata that can extend our senses, but again, it's gonna limit us to our own senses. You can create apparata that will use different visions, okay, that we naturally don't have, but again, that is still gonna have to be translated to our own vision, because we only see 1% of the visual, of the visual spectrum, okay, the visual spectrum of light, which kind of makes us really blind to what is out there in the universe and even here on our own planet. So the point of this is, even if you make a machine that allows us to see in ultraviolet, what that machine does is it translates ultraviolet to our own visual capability, okay? It's not necessarily that which actually is. Whatever we see, whatever we perceive, is only perceivable, physically speaking, from our five senses. So based on the quality of our senses, okay, that thing will be translated to us in a certain way. If a person has a certain uh, difference, let's say, in their visual capability. For example, daltonism, they will see green instead of red, for example, and to them and their awareness, something will be green and something else will be red instead, and everyone will most likely call them mad or will call them deficient or whatever, just because they are different to a certain extent. So we have to understand that everything science related is also limited by our own perceptions, by our own ideas, beliefs, and understanding. And understanding comes from certain levels of belief, and belief also means accepting something without the need for proof. Now, spirituality is the ability to be still. Okay, science is about activity, science is about doing. Learning won't help you much in science. Doing the practice is what will help you expand in science. While on the other part, spirituality is highly passive. You are not spiritual, you are being spiritual, and spirituality is something that begins with each and every life. It's just that each and every life, each and every being reaches a certain state of spirituality, and well, will continue so within their following lives, although there is no such thing as following and previous, but let's still keep moving. Oh, and it's actually 11:11 when I said that. I wasn't looking at the screen up till now that much. So yeah, what I'm saying kind of has a certain level of truth, I could say. Now, the point about this is, what I can call my own truth, because these are things that I have acquired through the sources of wisdom that I have encountered and through my own introspection as well. So, spirituality is about diving deep within yourself, and as you do, you will be met with certain answers that are curtailed to your capabilities and to your certain level of awareness, okay? Because spirituality also has its depths, okay, also has its levels of awareness, and it can be that to a certain point you will believe a certain idea, you will have understood a certain amount, and then when your awareness increases even more, then well, you're finally gonna reach other depths of your understanding, so your ideas may change even dramatically. So all this being said, hopefully I've sparked some interest in people. Hopefully you've liked this video, and well, feel free to give me your opinion. Feel free to write answers or questions, especially questions that I may answer through some of my videos. Feel free to also share some of your wisdom with me. Feel free to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell if interested in looking, and learning more about yourself, especially if you're barely starting your awakening journey. And well, you're loved and appreciated. Whatever you're doing is the best you can at the right pace for you. And all this being said, take care of yourself, of your loved ones. Ferenjan Power signing out.